segregation affected everything, and wasn't limited to politicians and judges and courts, but affected day-to-day life and for most whites.
You know, I once interviewed for 2 hours at Duke John Hope Franklin about his book called Mirror to America, which I believe was his last book.
Autobiography.
Autobiography, yeah. And he said when he went to take, I believe it was the graduate record exam or one of those exams that you take to get into graduate school, he was to take it at Vanderbilt, which is northern Tennessee, but still the South. And as he was walking down around the campus, he would see African-American groundskeepers. And they could tell that he was going to do something academic, because I don't know, he's carrying a briefcase. And you know, their jaws dropped 3 feet. Symptomatic of what you're talking about. And when he got into the room, the proctor, who was a professor, asked him what he's doing there. And he said, I've come to take the test. I threw the test on the floor. And that's just a little bit of an example. He told another example. I'm telling some of these because it helps put flesh on the thing. When he was a little boy, I guess he was growing up in Oklahoma, there was a blind woman who was trying to cross a busy boulevard. And he said he'll help her. And so she took, he's a little 10-year-old kid, 11-year-old kid, took her hand, and he walked across the street with her. And somehow in the middle of the street with traffic whizzing around, she said to him, in effect, are you black or are you white? And he said, I'm black. Threw down his hand, blind, traffic everywhere. and negotiated it on her own. This stuff is just unbelievable.
Well, your blind story reminds me of the person at the university named Blind Jim Ivey, who was a black man who was blinded in an accident in the 1890s and started working on campus, not for the university, selling peanuts and candy to students. And he became known as Blind Jim, and a very respected figure on campus. Students sort of adopted him, and he became what he called himself was the dean of freshmen, because he kind of took the freshmen under his wing and gave them advice and tried to help them. But all this was in a very paternalistic relationship. And what Blind Jim did was work on the campus, and it, in many ways was part of the campus, but not really part of the university. And the students took care of him. They were very affectionate. He went to sporting events and cheered for the Rebels and went in parades with them in town and that kind of thing. But he was still an African American. Now, what I think is interesting about compare your blind story and Blind Jim's story, the fact that Blind Jim is blind helped him survive on the campus because he was not seen as a threat. Blind people are often pitied by sighted people, and so he is pitied now for being blind and for being black. And he's seen as harmless because he is, by the 1940s and 50s, old and blind, so he cannot even do the taboo thing of looking at white women, the white female students. So he's safe. But he plays a significant role in the life on the campus. Now, he dies in the mid-50s, soon after the Brown decision, and there is some reason to believe that attitudes had hardened after the Brown decision and that whites were treating him less respectfully. Some of the white students were. So perhaps he was becoming an anachronism after Brown, and his function could only be served under segregation.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.